Hello, everybody, and welcome to this unscripted interview with one of my favorite humans on this planet, called Lindsay Sukornyk. I am so thrilled and excited to welcome Lindsay to this podcast and Enrich TV, and it is going to be very much a conversation of two mothers, of two adventure explorers at home. I'm at home in England and Lindsay is at home in Costa Rica. And also in light of our project on longevity, just over a week ago, we saw each other in Sardinia on the other side of the planet here in Europe. And we were researching and studying different aspects of why people live longer and healthier. And when I saw Lindsay during that trip, also a year ago, before that, I thought that she has something that I would like to research. As a psychologist, I had this inner calling to connect with Lindsay. And as I did, I found gems of knowledge, wisdom, and practical advice that we would like to share during this time as we're collecting tools for a love-rich life here at Enrich TV and podcast. So, Lindsay, welcome from the bottom of my heart, and thank you so much for your time and jumping on this call. And the first question to you, who are you? Just tell us a little bit about where you come from, why you're in Costa Rica, and what are your tools for a love-rich life? Let's just straight away go inside.
Into it. I will start with one of my first tools, which is connecting with beautiful humans. And so I want to start by thanking you for having me on this beautiful platform, for exchanging your love and light with me as friends, as co-adventurers, as seekers on the path. So that's one of my main tools, is to listen to my intuition when I meet people. Now I'm calling them star people because I can see a spark in people's eyes, and I can sense and listen to my intuition about the fact, as you said about me, I feel exactly the same way about you. There's a magic in you. There's a curiosity, a delight, a joy. And so I want to thank you for having me on this podcast, this Enrich TV program today, but also for being such a beautiful part of my life. I feel so clear, so grateful I'm clear about the fact that it's really about deep connection, about community, about tribe. And that was one of my key takeaways from our recent trip about all the leading world experts on longevity, living longer, happier lives. Two key things became clear. And for me, it was, felt like I was doing handstands and cheerleading, because it's pretty much all of the work I've been doing for my entire career. My key takeaways were it's about deep soul connections as well as casual connections. But I know this about you, actually. I already know this to be true. I can connect to somebody's soul in a split second if I allow myself to be open and to see them. So as casual as our connections may be, there's always an opportunity to be tapping into the essence of who that person is sitting across from us. It could be eye contact on a subway. It could be a casual conversation in line at the grocery store, or it could be a lifetime of partnership or friendship with somebody. But one of the things I'm always curating and collecting is an opportunity to tap into that life force of the other person from a place of curiosity, from a place of reverence, of trying to understand who that person is, what makes them tick. And I also have a belief that every single person that enters my life has been sent to me as a teacher or as a guide. And that includes everybody, even the ones that test me or challenge me. And so my place of exploration is really on two fronts. A, what's the human experience I can express with that person? And it could be joy, it could be bliss, it could be play, it could also be anxiety, it could be sadness, it could be being triggered. But I'm always open to what is the expression of the human experience. And then the second thing I'm always aware of and seeking is, what's the lesson I meant to learn from this person? What's their wisdom? What's their gift for me? Their greatest insight that I didn't know about before. And I believe that part of living longer is really embracing the beauty and the fullness in every single moment. And one of the ways that I do that is through human connection. And what I found is that there's an unlimited source of vitality, of energy, like the tree of life in the movie Avatar is the perfect analogy. And I actually think of it in these terms. It's like we come together as human beings and we plug in our avatar tails to each other and we exchange whatever is meant to be exchanged, whether it's love, whether it's information, whether it's just a shared experience, it doesn't matter. And I am so present to the beauty of that, that I allow the energy of that, which is ultimately, I believe, divine energy as manifested through human beings. I allow it to fill me up as if you were going to a gas tank with your car or any other source of power or source of energy. So that's one thing that our relationship is the perfect embodiment of. And the second thing that I will share a bit about my background, which will explain why I'm so obsessed with the second thing, which is this sense of purpose. So I grew up in a small town in Northern Ontario where community was really at the forefront. I came from a family of healers. So my father and my mother's father, my grandfather before, were physicians, very prominent healers. My mother, my grandmother were classic quiet healers. They didn't get paid for their work. They were stay-at-home moms. But the amount of healing that they shared in not only in our family, but in the community of friends and family members who were always, always, always in our home. There was a constant rotation of people in all places in the human experience. So I really was immersed in healing. I now know, looking back, it was my normal as a kid. It didn't even occur to me that it was anything other than just a normal kid's life, which it was. But then I found myself, I went along and followed the rules and tried to just check off all the boxes. I was really in a state, I call it the Walking Dead. I was a super overachiever, perfectionistic. I had a lot of anxiety growing up, and the way that I dealt with that anxiety, and really in a state of chronic almost fight or flight mode, was I tried to control as many outcomes as I could. And for me, that looked like being addicted to overachievement, trying to be I thought it was being in control. If I was at the top of the pile at all times, then I could choose what my future was. And I didn't want to feel like I was at the mercy of someone else's decision making. And so for me, what that looked like was I made up in my mind, for example, if I graduated at the top of my class in business school, then I could choose which company to go work for. And then, always trying to just be at the top so that I could be in control. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was that I did all those things and I was in control, but I realized I hadn't actually thought about what I wanted to do or what I desired, what the pleasure, what the passions were that I had, because I was so single-pointedly focused on winning the game because I thought that would help me to be in control. And so I found myself at, I think I was 24 years old or something along that, with this incredible job in management consulting, making, it was the top paying job out of my undergrad program. And I was at, sitting at tables with people who had graduated from Harvard and Wharton. And I was literally with the best of the best in the world. And I found myself sitting in a cubicle, gray on gray, 14, 16 hours a day, crunching millions of lines of data to save a bank money on pencils. And I found myself feeling empty, depleted, and really wondering, is this it? Is this all there is to life? And it was really an awakening moment for me to realize we have to be careful what we wish for. And so what I realized in that moment was the importance of having a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, that what we're doing is aligned with something that's important to us. And it doesn't even matter what that purpose is. And my purpose is probably very different from your purpose or somebody else's purpose. But the real rude awakening I had at that moment was how empty and how really ultimately soul-sucking, and you can actually die sort of in the metaphorical sense, but maybe even the literal sense. Yeah. One day at a time, one breath at a time. The further we are away from living on purpose, being fueled by our passions, I think that's the antithesis to living a long and happy life, whether it's in terms of the number of years you live or in the richness of each moment of your life. So from that moment on, I, from my own experience, became obsessed with living my own purpose, honoring my own passions. And that looked like, for me, traveling around the world, leaping into the unknown. I quit everything, which was terrifying, to step into the unknown. I had no idea what I was going to do next. And I think, like with most things in life, we need to let go of, this is actually, I'm becoming clearer and clearer on this path of whatever you want to call it, awakening, enlightenment, or just living your fullest, richest life. It doesn't matter what you call it. I really believe there's an element of you need to release all the known, all the control, and it could be in a micro level on just thought processes or daily habits, or it could be a giant leap, like in my case, which was leaving everything, career behind, identity, ego. But there's an element of trust that I think needs to be present. And so there's a beauty and a gift in leaping into the unknown, and it's a practice that gets easier over time, but never easy entirely. But the more that we leap into the unknown, the more that we trust that our desires are legitimate and real and that we deserve to live these lives, the more the universe starts to respond and we start to draw those things towards us. When we move from fear into belief, into acting as if, but not just acting as if, actually feeling the feelings that we desire to feel, those things that we think are going to get us those feelings start to come to us even more quickly and automatically. So the two key takeaways for me have been connecting deeply with human beings, and then on the second side, aligning with purpose. And since that moment, I ended up, through a number of amazing random coincidences, which are never random, finding a career in coaching and have worked in elite leadership coaching for my entire rest of my career, really using my own life as a social experiment to practice all these tools, all these practices. I'm a seeker, I'm an adventurer, so I like to go out literally and metaphorically to the edges of the earth and figure out everything I can about the human experience, about thriving. I study the underbelly, the shadow work of the human experience as much as I study the thriving and the leadership and the movement towards bliss or enlightenment. And I basically put it all together, and then I handpick and curate what I resonate most with as the tools and the practices, and then I weave them back together in a tapestry of, I see myself as a translator. I go out and I immerse myself in all these other lands, these languages, these cultures, and then I translate. Let's say that 98% of something is not necessarily relevant, but that 2% of whatever it may be, whether it's yoga or Buddhism or leadership research or insert any number of modalities that I play with, surfing, it doesn't matter. I try everything, body, mind, spirit. And then I pull back that 1% or that 2% and I weave it back together and I do my best to translate it into usable, actionable, practical, simple tools and practices that we can do in the context of our often complex and busy everyday lives. Because I also have a huge belief in the beauty of, as much as I have a fantasy of kind of disappearing up a mountain and, meditating and staying in a blissful state by myself for the rest of my life in this state of euphoria, I really think the real work is coming back down from the mountain and seeing how we can honor all these principles and these ways of being and these spiritual connections in the mundane, in the everyday world, and through that become even more powerful and ultimately be able to have an even greater impact as we lead by example and as we share our gifts, whether it's just through our example, through smiling at strangers on the street, or whether it's through writing books or speaking or coaching or building businesses. I think the really ninja level of the spiritual practice, and you and I have talked about this a lot, being moms, having very beautiful, busy, full lives, is like, can you bring that same sense of connection into the muck and the beauty and the complexity, I call it beautiful chaos, of everyday life? And that, for me, is the ultimate opportunity for growth and expansion.
That's amazing. What a start, Lindsay. People listen, like myself, I'm thinking, if I didn't know you, and it all looks beautiful, you live in Costa Rica, and it's one of the blue zones where people live longer and happier, so you just won a lottery, you're just there by some sort of divine appointment, and you're so happy, you look so positive, and you do yoga, you teach yoga, of course you will feel so aligned. And people in the office, in that cubicle, in different parts of the world, they don't feel safe or secure to leave the job, and there's always a reason why they're still there. or even they're in transition where they're still figuring out. Maybe they're coaches or they're wannabes, want to be that artist, want to be that expert, want to be that person who is next door to me. How do you do this? How do you live your life to the fullest and awake? Is it something innate? Is it something that you can teach or that we can learn from you? What are the practical tools that we can get from today?
I love that question. I think that's the most exciting question we could be talking about, because my journey did involve there was a clear moment in time where I quit my job. I went traveling. I was in sheer terror the entire time. I really believed I would never work again, that I would be blacklisted from everything I had built up till that point. I risked everything, and in doing that shattered my ego and had to come face to face with a lot of very raw, real truths about myself, fears, anxieties, beliefs I had about what made me important, which was at that time, what made me important was achievement, having a certain level of prestige, and I had to become really brutally honest with myself. So I don't believe that you need to take a giant catastrophic leap. In fact, I had a person just the other day, I was speaking coaching, and it was one of these conversations about, do you quit your job and sell everything and move? And I said, no. I actually don't advise that. That's actually not where and I have coached thousands of people over the years, so many of them in exactly the scenario you just said. And I want to share that what I now know is I tend to be all in. That's my personality. So for me, living in that edge of all or nothing, we joke, we say we don't fuck around, that kind of lifestyle. Like if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. But I understand that everybody has an entirely different tolerance for risk and an entirely different appetite for that edge experience. And everybody's edge is different. So the key is to be aware of where your edge is and to just step into your edge one step at a time. And sometimes it could look like a giant leap, and sometimes you have no choice. You could get a smackdown from the universe and get fired, or have a partner leave you, or something that you didn't choose. So there will be catastrophic moments. But what I really advise, and this is the practice that I do with my clients, is to really start doing the work within the context that you're already living. So if you think you're just going to quit your job and go get a job across the street and everything's going to be fine, I would argue that you're kidding yourself, because you're going to take yourself right across the street and be facing all the same patterns, and you're highly likely, almost guaranteed, to replicate the exact situation that you think you're leaving. So my work now in my own life and with all my clients is to tweak as much as you can within the context that you're in. And I have seen, I would say maybe 9 times out of 10, people who come to me saying either I need to leave my job, I need to leave my relationship, I need to, they think they need to just do this thing. When we start doing the work about discerning what specific things are not aligned for you, it's like this giant ball of I'm not happy or I feel unfulfilled. We start pulling off one thread and then another thread. And the work is around self-awareness. So around just being aware of, where am I out of alignment? My values aren't being honored. I'm not on purpose. And we one by one have people take radical responsibility for being the change, for asking for what they want. So those are the tools that we use, which is A, to identify what I desire, what my needs are, what I value, and then B, ask for it or create it through my actions, and then see the impact, receive the feedback, and it's an iterative approach. And ultimately what I've seen are countless examples. I'll use the job example because you brought it up and it's such a perfect example. So I have had countless people come to me and say, I need to leave. My job is empty. I'm not getting any of my needs met here. It's a disaster. I hate my boss. I hate everything. I hate. So we one by one, we go through it. And so, for example, we get clarity on their purpose. So I really want to serve. I want to help people. I want to connect deeply with humans. Or I hate my boss. They're a real jerk. Okay, great. What's being triggered? What are your values that aren't being honored there? What's the fierce conversation that you need to have with your boss from a highest self perspective to redesign this relationship? How do you need to be showing up energetically with your boss in order to create the reality that you desire? And we go one by one through all the things. And it's always the truth that as we're showing up with the boss, we're probably showing up in our personal lives and I'm the common denominator. It's not the boss, it's not the job, it's not everybody else. And then we go into the taking action part, which is to create your own reality, not just by visualizing, which I'm a huge fan of, but you got to also take the inspired action. We have to listen to what we desire, visualize what we want, and then we have to act on it. It's not a passive process. You know, you can't just sit there and all of a sudden you need to have the conversations. You need to maybe build the website. You need to make the client calls. And so through that challenge and accountability, what I've seen so many times, and I love it, is they create these insanely amazing realities that they couldn't have even dreamed existed. For example, early in my career, I have a couple of amazing clients who came to me. One was at Accenture and one was at P&G, on the, fast track to the top of each of those organizations, superstar performers, and both of them separately came to me and said exactly what we were just talking about. I'm not fulfilled. I'm killing it. I'm getting all these accolades. I can see my path for the next 10, 15, 20 years, and it's amazing, but it's just not my path. And so in each of those cases, we did the work that we're talking about, and totally by coincidence, each of them ended up being called into coaching, which it doesn't have to be coaching. It could be any number of things. But they actually ended up creating internal coaching divisions in each of those organizations and ended up creating an entire department, division, series of programs. And each of them are still in those organizations to this day, 15 years later. Wow. And the impact that they've had from within, and I'm such a believer in revolution from within. If you have that context or that liaison with historically maybe what we would think of as less enlightened environments, corporate or this or that, or the entertainment industry, I think that's an even more exciting opportunity to not run from it and escape from it, but to see how much magic you can create from within. So those are two examples. I could give you 1,000 of, and it could be a relationship, or it could be even family relationships that people think they need to distance from, any kind of external circumstance. And the key tools, I mentioned a few, but I'm going to repeat them right now. Number one is naming and acceptance of the truth. It's radical to say, I'm not fulfilled, I'm not happy, something's missing. And that can be the most raw, vulnerable, radical step that anyone takes. It's so easy to distract, to numb out. And we could list any number of ways that we do that. Obvious ways are alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, prestige, reality TV, you name it, Netflix, any way that we're checking out. So the radical step of acknowledging that you're not happy, the deep work of grieving, feeling the feelings that truth telling will bring up. So acknowledgement, presence, feeling, experiencing the truth of where you're at, and then starting to discern specifically what you desire. Maybe journaling, maybe visualizing, maybe working with a coach or any kind of healer that you resonate with. Then asking for what you want, so taking inspired action. And my practice, if I could advise one thing every day to people, is to do one thing a day that scares you. That thing that gives you butterflies in your stomach, that you have a hunch on the other side of your highest self, your soul, however you want to articulate it, is like there's something really good over there, but your mind or your ego might be saying, no way in hell are we going over there. That challenges everything that we know. I say do one thing a day that scares you. And that could look like sending one email to somebody doing a project in your organization that's a little bit different from what you're doing, and having that vulnerability of sort of like, I like you. Do you like me? Can I come and work with you? It could be a dating thing. It could be having a tough conversation with a parent you've never had. There are limitless numbers of ways. Or it could be quitting your job and getting on a yacht and sailing through the Greek islands, for your life, and figuring out how to build a business where you can do that. So there's no limit to what it can be, but it's a practice. And the practice is to listen. So taking a bit of time each day to get into stillness, whether that's through nature, walking, movement, yoga, meditation, or biking, swimming, developing a practice so you can quiet your mind, quiet the noise, listen to what your highest self is telling you, and then leap into the unknown. And it can be a tiny little baby step, or it could be something that really is hugely edgy for you, and it doesn't matter. It's the practice. And this is what I love, and research is supporting this, which I love both science, the art and the science of human potential. So the art and the spirit side of it is to listen to your highest self, step into your fears. And the science side of it tells us that that's how we build confidence. The more that we step into our fears, the more that we try something that is an edge experience, the more our confidence builds, whether we succeed or whether we fail. Because what was once a perceived barrier or something a threshold we were not able to cross, just by virtue of crossing into that experience, whether we succeed or fail, we're no longer confined by that perceived barrier. So then we start to build a feeling of trust in ourselves, of resilience, that if we fail, we'll figure it out. And the more that we fail and the more that we bounce back from failure, the greater our confidence gets and our trust in ourselves. I can figure this out. And so ultimately you get to the point where you can leap off almost any cliff, but trust that you have the capacity to figure it out on the way down. You'll grow your wings. You'll reach out for the people you need to. You'll be guided along that way. Yeah. And that's the payoff of the practice. But it can start with tiny little baby steps.
Wow, that's really helpful. Now, what happens with you when you are in the negative spiral? I mean, I don't know whether you are, but a lot of people, especially these days when they want to achieve certain things, and when they transition to their ideal path, what they think it is, they still have stumble blocks. They still have those challenges, and sometimes it goes really bad down. We work with people with depression, with anxieties, with some very strong emotional outbursts. So what is your practice, and when you feel low and tired and ill, to get out of that mud, to get out into the light? What is your helping power?
Thank you for that question. I think that is such a beautiful and important question. And first of all, my practice is to not try to get back to the light right away. I am a huge believer and practitioner of really embracing the shadow work. I think I would say as important, if not more important, than the question of how do you flip yourself back to the light, because when done well, it automatically shifts you not only back to the light, but infinitely higher in the human experience than you even had access to before. I really believe, I know this to be true in human experience, the lower we go, whether it's in depression, anxiety, tragic things that have happened, if we're able to transmute that experience, to make meaning of it, to learn from it, to develop anything from self-awareness, compassion, humility, if we can take that muck, as we think about it as a metaphor, and use it as fertile ground, then the highs that we're able to achieve are even higher. So I have great aversion, really, in a lot of the human potential movements of practices that are only focused on the light and just flip the switch. I can actually do that extremely well. And I could sit here and tell you 52 practices I do to get me into a higher vibrational state. But I actually think that's a bypass. Mm-hmm. And I think with the appropriate guidance, and if you're deeply depressed or if you're really on a very, very threshold place, I 100% advise that you seek help, whether it's a therapist, a healer, or all of the above. So first of all, I have a roster of healers that I work with. I am forever doing my own work. I 100% believe in leading by example. And so for me, what I do when I get into these shadow states, and I want to be crystal clear that the more of this work we do as we spiral around, it is not a linear path that like, oh, good, I checked off that issue. That's done forever. No. It will, the universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it, will give us the opportunity time and time again to continue to revisit any places in our, I can think of it as sticky energy, like tar almost that's stuck. So imagine if our bodies or our vessels are like this, potentially like a beautiful crystal tube available to have source, love, and light flowing through us at all times. We're giving love, we're receiving love, we're offering into the world, we're receiving back. These shadow times, triggers, however you want to articulate it, I think of them as little sticky pieces of mud or tar on the side that things can get stuck to and you can get caught. And so what you're describing for me, I think of as like an eddy on a river, that you just get kind of stuck in that place. And so my practice, and the one that I use with clients, is not to try to bolt, because the more you try to fight it, the more it will pull you back. It's just the natural law of the universe. So I actually, when I get into that, I'll just speak for myself, which is what I advise my clients to do. My practice now is surrender, full surrender. And for me, that looks like journaling, like a madwoman. Journaling is a massive practice. Can't say enough about if you do nothing else in your life but journal. I think you will profoundly change your life. So when I'm journaling, I'm thinking about two things. Number one is the acknowledgement of how I'm feeling. And so I have, let's say anxiety is an old friend of mine. We go way back. So if I'm in anxiety, let's say, and I'm ruminating, which is an old pattern that pokes its head up still, I have a journaling practice, which is simply, right now I am feeling ... Right now I am telling myself, my mind is telling me ... And I just allow it to pour out of me from a place of curiosity, of acceptance, of observing. I think of myself as a scientist with a lab coat on, but I'm observing myself. So it allows me to get into that witness consciousness of I'm both fully in the experience. I'm not trying to intellectualize it. And at the same time, I'm observing myself in it. And that takes practice. But journaling is, for me, the way to do that. So acknowledging where I am. I use tools like music is a very powerful tool for me. So if I'm feeling really something, sad, any kind of emotion, I actually consciously seek out music, or certain music is my main modality, to allow me to immerse myself more fully in the feeling of it. And that often looks like a lot of crying. I think crying is one of the greatest things we can do. We know a lot, science again shows about the release of cortisol. Energetically, I think of it in terms of energy that's been trapped in my body at some point along my history. And it obviously needs to come out. And so as I'm crying, I know people have a lot of resistance to cry. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm crying, I'm sorry. And I see them trying to hold it together. So the invitation is the opposite, is to let it flow, let it go through the tears. So imagine, again, every tear coming out is a purification of that trapped sticky tar. And I imagine every tear is like, okay, I've acknowledged that little piece of, if we think of it as tar, it's like, oh, hi, fear of abandonment. Thank you for letting me know that you're still in me. I love you. You can stay as long as you want. I'm here for you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to try to shove you back onto the wall. I'm going to cry. I'm going to journal. I'm going to call a soul sister like Darya, or I'm going to call a healer, or I'm going to speak to my partner, or whatever it is that's your support. I'm going to journal about you. I'm going to dance about you. I mean, there are a million practices. I'm going to go into my inner child. I'm going to speak to her about this fear of abandonment and let her know I got her back. There are a million different practices. And only when that piece of ourselves, which is such a beautiful piece that was just maybe shoved into the shadows, it doesn't mean it's a bad part of ourselves. When it can come out and be fully loved and fully embraced, and we develop that place of deepest love for that part of ourselves, as much as we love the part of ourselves that's on stage receiving awards, or the A+ mom who's got on her A game, but loving that vulnerable part of ourselves, that's when it becomes the light. And so it's only by embracing what we consider to be shadow or darkness, which is just things that haven't been explored yet, like they haven't had the light, they haven't been allowed to come to the light. They're not good or bad parts of ourselves. And the thing that I want to just say to everybody is, sorry, not sorry, but the work never ends. And the more that you clear, the more that your higher self, your soul, knows that you're capable for even deeper work and even bigger work. So it's really the journey of a lifetime. So it's like, you better just buckle in and get ready to go for the ride. And the more you resist the work, the more fiercely the lessons will have to come, the more strongly. So if you're in a daily practice of self-awareness, of observing, of healing, of releasing, and then there are many other practices, which I will share a couple of because I don't want to leave everybody hanging on just that. But the shadow work has to be done with the intention of moving through it. And one of the ways I do is I think about what are the lessons and the blessings here. So the lessons could be something like, interesting, I notice I'm still triggered by this fear of abandonment or the withholding of love. Interesting, good to know that's still there. What's the work I still, so again, it could be the inner child stuff. It could be setting up boundaries with people. It could be just a reframe in your mind. And then the blessings could be something like, wow, I have such humility for people, other people in the human experience, which is, by the way, everyone who may have these feelings of fear of abandonment sometimes. So the gift in that could be humility, compassion, understanding, and maybe even I can now incorporate that in my toolkit of things I'm able to meet my clients on, or things I'm able to speak about or write about because I fully embraced it. And so as we do that work, then we can start to get into the practices that maintain us. So if you're in an acute shadow work time, that's what I would talk about. On a maintenance program of I'm good, I'm not doing a deep dive right now, I'm not being triggered, to go into that shadow work. Some practices that can flip the switch if you're just kind of on the verge of going down and you can see that you could spiral and you could go down that path. If you catch it early enough, some very powerful, quick tools are as simple as gratitude practices, making a conscious effort every morning and every night if you're really in a raw, vulnerable time, appreciation for what is. Music, again, I use in the opposite way, which is I have playlists of songs that make me feel expanded and elevated. I have podcasts that I listen to. I have friends that I connect with on a conscious, regular basis that elevate, that make me feel more elevated. I'm very clear about people, experiences, and thoughts that drain me. I'm very, very clear about energy management. I'm very aware of what thoughts, circumstances, places, experiences trigger me to go down into those spirals. And I do my best to either do the inner work to shift their impact on me, or the outer work of plugging those leaks in my vessel of, if, for example, somebody is so massively toxic to me and I've tried everything I can to shift it, that's a time for me to, with love and grace, remove myself from their presence, or to shift the paradigms from when I am. And so those are some of the practices. So again, journaling is another one you can use to go up the tube, if you want to think of it in vibrational terms. So journaling around gratitude, journaling around our desires, thinking about practice I do is how do I want to feel today? So I just did that this morning. Super easy morning practice is where am I now, which is an acknowledgement of what is. Right now I'm feeling this and this. 3 things I'm grateful for, and 3 ways I desire to feel today. And so then what we do is we plant the seeds in our minds to look for opportunities to feel delight, or to feel curiosity, or to feel in love. And so those are 3 practices if you're on the verge of going into the shadow work. I just want to also acknowledge, because I know you work with really beautiful, powerful people, and you are as well, and you know this to be true. We've talked about it at great length. But as we clear our own inner work, which can feel like the really raw initial stages of the journey, which never actually goes away, because inevitably we'll come back and visit certain topics probably for our entire lives until they dissipate. But then we start to really be vessels for healing on generational work, ancestral work along the collective consciousness. So again, I advise that we just strap in and enjoy the ride, because if you make yourself available to be of service and to be a vessel for sharing the light, doing the work, being a person who is available for the transmutation and the expansion of human beings and collective consciousness, it doesn't get easier. In fact, it can get almost, but it's like you're better trained. So you're like a Jedi trained ninja ready to do that work. So if you had that work to do at the initial stages, you would probably be impossible. It could be crushing. But it's like an Olympic athlete or any kind of elite performer. You develop the skills, you develop the capacity, you build the muscles, you create the network and the team and the entire infrastructure, so that when you're called into bigger and bigger missions, maybe even global missions, that you're meant to be speaking in global circles or leading at the global level, you're ready for it. So embrace the shadow work, embrace the vulnerability. I have many, many clients and friends who are doing epic, world-changing stuff, who still call me and like, I'm spiraling, I'm in it, I'm back here, and we just work through it. And it becomes actually this beautiful space. Ultimately, my practice is, can I find the bliss in every moment? And what that looks like is even the bliss in the anxiety, even the bliss in the depression, in the sadness, in the not knowing, in the confusion. And how I do that is I can feel the feeling of it. And at the same time, I'm like, oh, thank God it's coming up. That means it's going to be, this little piece will be cleared And I know on the other side of this stickiness is even more space for love, for joy, for bliss, for service that wasn't available before. And so I really keep my eye on the prize, which is what's available on the other side of that kind of dark valley of the soul, or the dark night of the soul. So those are some of the tools I use.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Lindsay, especially for people who are in those powerful positions, or they're exploring what their passion and what their mission is, the purpose, and you help them to feel alive and awake once they get in the union with themselves. And a lot of them ask, I don't know what my calling is, what my purpose. Everyone is talking about purpose. And okay, you found the coaching, you found the teaching, you found the NGO, and some people are happy where they are. But those who are doubting, those who are not settled in where they are, and they acknowledge that they're not happy, but they don't know what to do, where to find that purpose. What would be your path of a unicorn, like a true unicorn path?
After the unicorn, first of all, on the very tactical level, I have very powerful tools and processes which are available actually for free on my website. So I have an ebook that's called The Plan, that people can self-guide themselves through exercises to articulate their purpose. So that's a very tactical thing. From a practical practice perspective, a couple of really simple ways to get on that journey of exploration, because that's really what the path of the unicorn is on our way to unicorn, to getting into this state of flow and constant connection to joy and the infusion of joy and passion, so that we can then serve out in the world, would be a simple practice, simple but maybe not easy, because if you're just really starting to train your brain, it is a practice, no different than if you were taking up a new martial art or a new skill set that you really don't know anything about. You need to learn, and it feels awkward at first, but it could be one very simple practice is to pay attention to what brings you joy and write it down. And it could be absurd. For example, when I didn't know what I wanted to do, I did an exercise along these lines. And here are the things that I had on my list. Well, I really like having lattes with my friends. I like going to the coffee shop and having lattes. I really like reading books. So if I could get paid for reading books, that would be amazing. I like reading Us Weekly, which is like kind of a celebrity stories, what are the celebrities doing today? I really like being at my cottage in the summer, and I like scuba diving, and I like being outside, and I like skiing a lot. So those are my lists. And I was like looking at them like, this is absurd. This is not a job. This is not a career. Going for lattes with friends and reading celebrity magazines doesn't have anything to do. But I stayed in the inquiry, and I started chatting with people and having it be and being really curious. And so this is another practice that I did, asking anybody who I saw, who I thought was aligned with their purpose, I would say, how did you get to, and it's so fun. If you're at a cocktail party or you're sitting somewhere, you could just be like, so what do you do? Which is the most boring, worst question anybody can ever ask. Please never ask that question again. So I would say something like, I'm really inspired by your energy, and you seem to be really passionate about your life. Could you share with me how you got to where you are? And I was just voraciously taking in any kind of information I could get from people who I thought resonated in a way that I wanted to. And so from that, through a very long process, I ended up coming to where I am now. And now in hindsight, I can tell you all the reasons sitting and having lattes with friends is about deep human interaction, soul-to-soul connection. Reading the celebrity magazines is because I'm deeply in love with people and their stories. So hearing about people's life changes and their successes and their things that they're creating fascinates me. It always has. Same thing with reading, literature. I've been a voracious reader my whole life. You can't really get paid to just read, apparently. But what I knew about, maybe you can actually, I'm not going to say that out loud. That's probably, people do.
We can, because when we prepare for our speeches, we prepare for our workshops, we read so much and we get paid for that. So in a way, it is.
Exactly. Actually, that's a great example. And so, but again, for me, the literature was all about the human experience. I couldn't get enough of the great literature and the storytelling around deep, raw human experiences. And I'm just collecting all this mapping of the human experience and filling in different pieces of this giant web of human experience. And then the travel and the nature and the leisure time, guess what I do now? I lead groups down in Costa Rica. We're surfing. I go all over the world, ski trips, these trips in nature, using movement, using adventure activities as a metaphor for transformation, and allowing people to use their bodies, use their experiences as a playground for stepping into their highest potential. So whatever feels to you like frivolous or shallow or not important to discovering, this whole thing about purpose, it sounds very heavy. It's like, I have to find my purpose. It's got to be meaningful. It's so significant. And just forget about it. Just have fun, because you think that you're going to feel a certain way once you achieve purpose, once you achieve your mission. And the real truth is that you need to start feeling the feelings that you think you're going to get in the future now. And so the real work is in training yourself to feel the way you think you're going to feel once you get there. Yeah. And by vibrating at that level, you will draw those opportunities, those people, those awarenesses to you. So have fun and be playful. That's why I call it the path of the unicorn. There's a lot of kind of mythological significance to it, but it's also have fun with it. It doesn't have to be so serious. And your purpose, this is actually a really important point. Your purpose may only be revealed in hindsight. So if you can take one step at a time, I'm going to step into joy. I'm going to step into joy. I'm going to step into joy. Listen to the things that piss you off, that you feel called to take action on. That's a great way to understand what you feel called to do. So if I was just at an orphanage yesterday and holding these babies, and listen to the signs. So I'm holding these babies. I'm down on the floor playing games, and I had this massive knowing in my body that I'm meant to do something major with kids, and maybe it's orphans or it may be young moms with babies who are struggling. I just got a huge download from my highest self, which is like, this is what's next for you. And in my ego mind, I'm like, I don't have time to take on orphans in Costa Rica. I've got 4 kids. I've got a thriving business. I don't, but my soul is like, you'll figure it out. And so just trust. I'm confident enough to know now that the path will be revealed to me. And I came back and started having a conversation with my girlfriend who's also aligned. And as I'm getting goosebumps talking about, she's like, oh my gosh, I've had a very similar calling. We need to do something locally. And so I just spoke it. And I really advise that people speak. I have this hunch about working with kids or young moms, and I feel really deeply called to serve in that way, but I'm scared. I don't know how to do it. And speak it. And then that's when your collaborators, your partners, and it may not even be that you need to go run an orphanage, for example. It could just be that you needed to speak it so that you could activate someone else. And maybe you're going to be a steady stream of donations to that orphanage, or maybe you're going to be the visionary who just sparks the idea, and then there's going to be another group that comes in. So you just don't know how it's going to unfold. So if you follow your joy, listen to those whispers of this way, you'll know when you know. They can be a whisper or they can be a scream, and it can look like a feeling of deep knowing, of deep alignment, of excitement. It could also look like terror, like resistance, if it's really big and you really don't. So just do your best to stay in inquiry, to stay curious. And again, so for me, the one thing that maybe scared me, it wasn't that scary, but it was to be vulnerable with my friend and say, I don't know if this sounds crazy, but I was holding a baby today and I got to do work with orphans. So that was my one thing a day that scared me, was to put it out there and admit to myself. And so that's circling back to all the practices, but just try to have fun. Life is way too fun to be so hard on ourselves. And as I said, if you're really craving purpose and it's something you desire, then hire a coach. There are people, that's what we do. That's what I've been doing my entire career. So there are resources out there. If you go to a bookstore, this is another really powerful thing. Go to a bookstore and just start to pay attention to which books are asking you to pick them up. Go to the human potential section or whatever, and I guarantee you're going to end up with another piece of the puzzle that's going to take you one step closer. Or start chatting with your friends and, maybe say, oh, does anybody know anyone in our community who are doing workshops or who are doing this kind of work? And you will start to get the pieces of the puzzle for sure.
Wow. I could stay in this topic for another few hours. Just before we finish, you live in Costa Rica, and it is one of the special zones. What is so different in that part of the world that we can learn from, that you're learning from, apart from the first two pieces that you shared, the tribe and the purpose?
Yes. I cannot say enough about nature. People really, really, really would do well to reconnect with nature. There's a really big theme around where we live around rewilding, and that's really about stripping away the separation from our raw, true natures. And we build up these layers. It could be how we were parented or what society told us or rules that religion gave us. And it literally, it could be as metaphorical as stripping away socially constructed beliefs. For example, that you need to sit in a cubicle from 9 to 5 every day and climb a certain ladder and be validated by other people to tell you how important you are when you get promoted. That's a socially constructed belief that can be reevaluated, but it can be as literal as stripping away the clothing. Are you dressing in a business suit every day, which I was, and you really desire to be in bikinis and flowy dresses? And I take a lot of my client calls on the beach, walking the beach, walking in nature. So rewilding is really about getting back in touch with the essence of your true self. And when you're so aligned with yourself, you draw so much more opportunity, so much more abundance to you because you're vibrationally aligned with your truth. And so getting out into nature, for sure. Here where we live, there is a daily ritual, which is implicit. It's not announced. There are no billboards telling, but every person in the community who's available gathers down on the beach for sunset. And I know this happens in a lot of other communities because people have shared this. So starting to tap into the rhythms of nature, seasons of life. So we gather as a community, and their surfers are out on their boards, families, kids playing in the sand, retreat groups, etc. But everybody comes together, expats, locals, tourists, etc. And there's a reverence for the setting of the sun. And so bringing ritual back in, connecting to the rhythms of nature. We have the rainy season and the dry season. And so really, if you're in a city or if you're in anywhere, see if you can start to tune into, and this, I used to be a runner, for example, in Toronto. And so the practice that I would use when I wasn't in Costa Rica, because I didn't live here, I would only come down for a month a year and then I would have to go back. And I'm like, how do I bring the Pura Vida back? And so I would be running in the valley system. And I bet there's a trail system in almost every city, or get a little bit out of town. And the practice could be to just pay attention to the seasons. So, the blossoms are coming out. Oh, now they're big flowers, and which flowers are here, and getting the smells. And so that starts to help you really, your nervous system calms right down. You start to get in tune. And for example, if it's minus 40 in the middle of winter, maybe you let yourself stay in bed and have a little cup of tea in the morning. I used to force myself. I used to be a really big runner. And I now know in hindsight, I probably forced myself into a nervous system or adrenal overload because I was trying to mind and muscle through, where the rhythm of nature might have had me be a little kinder, gentler to myself, for example, on a minus 40 morning. That's an example of how to tune into nature. Sometimes you still want to go for a run, go for the run, no big deal. So nature is number one. There's a real sense of generosity of spirit here and connection. So we talk about this a lot. So this idea of competition versus collaboration is something I think that everybody can tap into wherever you live. So we have, for example, let's just look at the movement community, because there are incredible teachers here, world-renowned teachers. But if you go to any one of their classes, chances are there will be 1, 2, 3, 5 other teachers in that class. So there's this sense of abundance, of mutual support. So in whatever field you're in, one practice you could do is to think about how you can support your peers, how you can collaborate, how you can, together we rise. That's a definite theme here. And it's not divisive and I'm against you. It's as you succeed, as you thrive, we all thrive. So that's another thing, is really focusing on elevating others, and through that, knowing that you're already automatically expanding.
Wow, that's so powerful. I just want to go and spend some time in Costa Rica now, looking at your background and hearing the birds singing and all the goodies and yummy things that for the soul that you shared. And I want to thank you, Lindsay, because it's a valuable time for us to spend even an hour, but diving in to one of the most important topics, how to live longer and happier, how to feel alive and awake. And I will put the website under the video for you, because I love the way how you approach life, you approach yourself, your parenthood. We talked in another topic for our discussion, sharing some of the tips and tricks how you deal with children. You have 4, and also having this style of life where you transitioned from a corporate career into the abundance, into the jungle, into the nature. And that is a metaphor how you feel, and I feel that resonance and vibration with you, and I admire you for doing that, and thank you for sharing that example. Is there anything else you would like to share before we depart into our daily life, so that we can still
I actually just got a sentence pop into my head, and I want to offer it as a fun practice for people to start right now, which is a super simple but fun thing, which is take your shoes off whenever you can. Go outside, find a park, find some nature, get barefoot, and just walk on the ground. And use that as, you can think of it as a walking meditation, as a connection to the earth, but let it be a metaphor for stripping away the separation of who you are at your essence and the interconnectedness of everything, of nature, of other humans. And so I just invite people to reconnect with whatever you're doing in your work or in your life. Just remember that we're all deeply, deeply connected, that you're supported as you step on the earth. Know that Mother Nature, source energy, divine, great spirit, whatever, your tribe, your people, you're deeply supported, you're deeply held, and just root into that knowing, and just know wherever you are is exactly where you should be, and the best is still to come, always, always. Yes. This or something better, always.
Yes. I'm off to run barefoot now.
Thank you so much for having me on here, and for the incredible work that you're doing in the world, for your sisterhood, for your love, and I'm so inspired by you, and I really cannot thank you enough for the energy that you share with me, the love you share with me, and the work you're doing with your family out in the world. It's been such an honor to collaborate in this way, so thank you.
Thank you, thank you. It's been a pleasure and honor and wonderful vibe to connect with you through the planet, through you know, this the beginning of something big. I feel it's gonna happen, and I wish you all the best with your book coming, with the video, with the film, and everything that you're doing in this world through change makers and influencers, elite performers, elite leaders. I cannot thank you enough. So have an amazing, amazing day.
Thank you. I love you. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.